Hello.
Hello. How are you, Eric?
I'm good. How's everyone doing?
Good.
Is everyone in, Mo?
How's it going?
I'm letting people in as they show up. Sorry.
Good morning, Jake. How are you doing?
Good, good. How are you?
Good. I'm just drinking my first dose of caffeine.
There you go. That always helps, doesn't it?
Always helps, all the time. You know it.
Absolutely. Can't go a day without it. See, Armand muted himself. What's with that?
No, he's
Armand's here.
Yeah, he's muted.
I don't think he has his video on.
no video or
He'll get
sound.
Armand's feeling shy today.
Does not want to be seen.
apparently.
Hey guys, so thank you so much for coming in. We'll get started shortly in about 3 minutes. We're just hanging tight so that we can make sure everyone is here.
Perfect.
All right, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for, showing up for the first of many events that are happening today. So really excited. It's pretty bright here in Chicago. I hope it's the same wherever you are. So we want to make sure that you get a lot out of this workshop. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce myself. So will Olivia, and then we'll kind of kick it off from there to make sure that we know what you guys want to get out of this, and then she'll start going through the information she wants to share with you guys. So I am the founder of To Her and Back, Brittany Johnson, and listen, I went to Purdue University, graduated from there, got my MBA, and worked in the tech industry with a little bit of PR marketing in my background, but my resume had a lot of blunders, and it took a while for me to get it right, but that's why you guys are coming to this event, so you can hear from people with what they had to do in order to get their resume right. All right, without further ado, Olivia Schiller, I'm going to hand it off to you.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yes, wonderful. Hi, I'm Olivia, and just a little bit of background about me is that I work in human resources. I have 6 years of experience in HR. I've been working within recruiting all of my experience in HR, but also other aspects of human resources like learning and development, payroll, benefits, all that kind of stuff. But recruiting has always been a big portion of my job duties. My field of expertise is going to also be in hospitality. So I worked with Hilton for 4.5 years in Chicagoland, and then now I'm currently at Soho House Chicago in the West Loop. And so I'm the assistant people and development manager there. So we call people and development, it's like human resources, but we changed the name because we think it's fun. So we're here to talk about resume building and just different things that you can do to help get your resume noticed and get your name out there. So we do want to hear from you guys a little bit about what fields you work in, what you're looking to get out of this workshop, any like big things that you would like to get across for today. So can you guys share with us what types of goals you have?
I guess I'll start. For anybody who doesn't know me, my name is Eric Delphin. I work as a graphic designer and intern manager under DIM Events. I actually designed the promotional material for this whole panel today. So I'm thankful to have been able to participate in that and contribute. But also as a graphic designer, my goal is to basically just succeed in the field, basically. And what I'm looking to get out of this workshop is the do's and don'ts of like resume building, essentially.
Great, thank you.
You guys don't know me. My name is Jake Langley. I am one of the videographers for the DIM Events team. Yeah, so like going with Eric, I just want to know like how I should go about my resume at this point in my career. I've had a couple internships, which is helping my resume a little bit, but you know, I need to beef it up a little bit more because I'm taking the freelance route. So I feel like it'd be a good start to have a nice resume to show clients and stuff like that. So that's it.
Okay, great, thank you. What else?
I am Andrew. I am a journalism intern at DIM Events. I work I would say I'm a freelance writer as well, but I also work in the restaurant industry. So I would say, again, sort of like similar to Jake, like beefing it up, making it appealing to people, and like how to market, especially the restaurant industry, because it can be pretty competitive and stuff. So yeah.
Great.
Hello, my name's Armand. I am also a videographer intern at DIM Events, and I would like to figure out how to put stuff in my resume so when I apply for something that I don't have experience in, the stuff that I do have can like replace that. If that makes sense.
Yeah, okay.
Hi, I'm Allison. I think what I would want to know specifically is how to create a resume that may kind of cater to what industry you may not specifically be in. I've been at the same company ever since I graduated college, so for the last 3-4 years, and it's very industry specific, but I'm looking to branch out of that industry, so just trying to figure out how to work a resume to kind of move in that direction.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Well, if you guys think of any other goals and things that you want to talk about, feel free to chime in. This is supposed to be an open conversation, so it's not just me lecturing at you. We want to make sure that this is continuous so that we can elaborate and collaborate with each other. So thank you guys for sharing those goals. We'll circle back with those at the end, but thank you for that. So with the purpose of a resume, we do want to talk about why we have them in the first place and what's so important about them, as well as we're going to go through the do's and don'ts, action words, resume breakdown, and then at the end we'll do some Q&A stuff. But first I wanted to show you guys a couple little excerpts that I have seen from resumes myself, which, you know, because people don't really pay attention to just the simplest things of like spelling or spacing or professionalism. So these are just a couple examples that I have seen over the time. What's wrong with the first sentence? Anybody?
Shortly is spelled wrong.
Yes. Brittany was like, I think you have a misspell. I'm like, nope, that's actually on purpose. So it's so minor, but it can really make or break just how employers look at you.
Mm-hmm.
So the first one, it has a misspell. The second one, it says it's best for employers that I not work with people. Very attractive. If this resume doesn't blow your hat off, then please return it in the enclosed envelope. Please disregard the attached resume. It is terribly out of date. Surprisingly, I get that one more often than not, and I don't know why. It's like people don't want to do the time and put in the effort to update their resumes. Exposure to German for 2 years, but many words are inappropriate for business. There's a lot of things wrong with this sentence, but more particularly, the exposure to German for 2 years is not the right way in which we would want to explain that we can kind of speak another language. I have a bachelorette degree in computers. I can play well with others and never been fired, although it can happen anytime now. And I know that these all sound pretty ridiculous, but it's like honestly what people have submitted in their applications before. So it's just an interesting way to think about the words that you're trying to explain about yourself and whether or not they're coming across the way you want it to. So again, we're going to talk about the purpose of a resume. We want to make sure that you are standing out to any of the employers that you're applying for. So it's supposed to be providing a summary. It's not going to be telling your whole life story. You don't want to give too much detail because when you're actually meeting with someone in person, you want to have things that are considered an element of surprise or just great. In addition to this little preview that you see on my resume, I also have this experience I can talk further about. So it's really just a summary. You don't need to fully explain in detail. And of course, it's a quick advertisement of who you are. So it's the representation of all the work that you've done and getting, you know, to this point in your life with all the internships and jobs and schooling and whatnot. But then, of course, the ultimate goal is to actually secure a job interview. And I do want to point out here that with mine and Brittany's experience in looking at resumes and recruiting and all of that, we will talk about just the process from our end of things and how your resume may be looked at or may not be looked at. So we'll talk about that a little bit later, but it's a little bit of an interesting process. All right, so some resume do's. What I recommend for you to do is to provide contact information that's up to date. I know it sounds silly, but a lot of the times people change their emails or they change their address or their phone number and they forget to update that kind of stuff. Using professional language, even if the company you're applying for seems to be really relaxed and cool and fun, you still want to have that professional tone. Including education, any relevant certifications, including awards, any recognition or honors that you've received in your current roles or previous roles. Adding job titles, the company name, and the location in which you worked. Like for me, it's all been within Chicago, but I find it to be interesting when I see that people worked in different countries or in multiple different states. I can kind of grasp what type of person they are just based off of location. So like for me, only working in Chicago, I'm not looking to move anywhere. But if I see that someone has worked in California and New York and Chicago, I can see that they're able to move around and they're flexible with a company, and that could be a good thing depending on the industry that you're looking into. Let's see, being specific with your job duties in your place of work. We'll talk about that in more detail in a bit. Including volunteer work or any special projects that are relevant. Now, I'm sure a lot of us have done quite a bit of volunteer work or activities that we think are definitely worth noting because it showcases the type of person that you are, but we also want to be mindful of how that is applicable to the company that you're applying for. For example, I had been interviewing a while ago for Four Seasons hotels, and the general manager asked me about my community service because I actually didn't list anything on there at the time, but I knew that it was something that Four Seasons really looked into with all of their applicants. So I was ready to answer that question. I was prepared mentally, but my resume didn't actually showcase anything. So that was a lesson learned for me. And then keeping all explanatory bullet points short and to the point. And proofreading is so important. Every time I look at my resume, even though I've looked at it many, many times, I always find something that I can change to make it better. Even if it's just altering some words, or you find a little mistake, like you put a period at the end of one sentence, but not at the other ends of other sentences. Just the attention to detail needs to be very strong in your resume because that helps showcase your attention to detail at the potential job that you're applying for as well. Any questions about this? All good, okay. Okay, a couple of resume don'ts. Don't go overboard with your heading. I have been blown away many times by very beautifully looking resumes, like great job, good effort, love the colors, love how much time and energy you probably put into this, but is it really getting the point across that you're able to be qualified for the job you're applying for? Probably not. So you want to be modest with your heading. We're going to break it down and go through every step of a resume, but just keeping in mind that every little inch that's on the piece of paper matters with a resume, so you don't want to underutilize a space when you could be using it for an advantage. Don't provide an inappropriate email address on your resume. Sounds silly, but you know, some of us still have our emails from like high school or junior high or whatever that are for junk emails, but you know, we don't want to be listing those on resumes. Don't use fancy or colorful fonts, graphics, or pictures. I have opinions about pictures, and I have opinions about colorful fonts and whatnot, because there is a line where it can be too much. Most people do not include pictures on their resumes. However, in the UK and in Europe, it's more common for people to put pictures on their resumes. So it's really just a preference. I find it to be best to not include any form of a picture or any indication about your physical appearance, because unfortunately there are still some unconscious biases that happen today with recruiters or with other employers, where they may not be considering you based off of just the quick glimpse that they have of you. Of course, we don't want that to ever be the case, but rather be safe than sorry and just not include a photo on there. Don't use slang or unprofessional language. Don't use immeasurable skills. I think this one is fun because people will always say, you know, I work well with others and I'm a great team player and things like that, but you're just telling me that. Is it convincing? Is there any proof of that? No. You have to have something that's measurable, that you're achieved XYZ thing. And don't copy and paste the application into your resume. That actually does happen quite often as well. So it's really just about how much effort and time do you care about your resume in order to then be successful in getting a job interview. Okay, action words are really important. I find it to be the best way to help describe yourself. Action words should be used conservatively. You don't want to use them too often where it's, you know, you have a whole sentence and it's all action words describing this one project you did one time, but you want to be able to get the point across that you were responsible for various tasks in your job and you were able to successfully deliver results on that. So play with adjectives. I think it's really fun, and it's a great way to just showcase your experience, but at the same time, don't want to overutilize that. So we'll take a look at that in a little bit as well. Okay, we have some examples of resume don't some bad examples, I guess. So I want to hear your opinions based off of the do's and don'ts that I've provided to you already. Can you tell me what is wrong with this resume?
I think in general, it's just formatted terribly, and it's
No
hard to
organization.
follow.
Yes.
Yeah, it's formatted not very well. What else?
The wording is not very good. Specifically, I think like I'm bilingual. Also, there's a spelling mistake. There's no punctuation in I'm.
They also say,
Um,
sorry.
no, go ahead.
They also said hashtag or whatever it's called, always in a good mood, number 4
Yeah.
at the bottom. So it's
Yeah.
they got work to do.
Also, all
Right.
the stars, they're throwing me off. What's going on with them? I'm confused. Why is there so many stars?
Who knows? People do really interesting things. You don't know why they do it sometimes. But yeah, you guys are right. There's a lot of things that are wrong. But
Oh,
some of the things that you guys didn't mention too is you can see the currently employed. Yes. What's the name of your supervisor? Dan. That is copying and pasting from an application. So you want to be careful with that. And of course, they clearly didn't proofread. Immeasurable skills, always in a good mood. That is 100% not true, because no human being can be in a good mood all the time. Although we can maybe pretend and try, but the, immeasurable skills, it's pretty obvious here. All right, how about this one?
Where is the resume?
yeah,
I don't know if it exists.
no skills,
There's like nothing on it.
Yeah.
no experience or anything.
Right. And I know that these kind of seem extreme because it's like I'm getting a point across to you guys, but I have seen resumes that look just like this and maybe have a little bit more detail to them. So can you tell me, like, what are the things that are wrong with this, other than there's not a lot of information?
In terms of like more detailed things, I noticed that the email is foxyface34@hotmail.com. So one thing that I learned is that you don't want to use an email that has like either like in just like an alias or just something that's completely unprofessional. Like it has to be an email that is like your name, essentially.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, I find that to be really interesting, and I get a kick out of it whenever I see an email that I'm like, really, should you be putting that on your professional resume right now? But good for you. So yes, so we have the inappropriate email. They didn't really proofread because the spacing is wrong up in their address. And of course, there's no description about where they've worked, if they left, if they enjoyed working there, if, there's really nothing that we can grasp from it. No education. So there's really nothing that I can get out of this. I would pass this resume in an instant. I would probably not even read it. All right. And then how about this guy? What's going on here?
What's going on? The first thing I noticed, there's no bullet point. I mean, there's like 3 of them, but it's just like too much. Like no employer is going to read an essay before considering to hire someone.
Right. Do you guys know approximately how long an employer will look at a resume on average?
Isn't it
4
like
seconds.
A couple of seconds.
2 seconds.
Oh my.
That's it. And so when I look at this resume, I'm like, I don't even want to read it. It's too much for me. I see outstanding business experience, references upon request. That's what I'm gathering from this resume, just by a quick glimpse, because it's too overwhelming for my eyes. So like we said, there's a lot going on here. There's a lot of improper spelling, no proofreading. There's too much fluff. There's too many words. There's too much of a description. We want to be straight to the point. The headings are confusing, just the order in which everything is. And I also find that this is a really misleading resume because they have so much information on it, but there's no description about the job duties that they held in each of the roles that they have listed as their experience. So you see under locations and positions, that's their list of their relevant experience, but I don't know anything about what you did. I just see how long you were there and where you were living. So this one's definitely too much information included in here. Okay.
Just to add to that, Olivia, I mean, I had this resume coming across my desk. I wouldn't even bother to read it because it just shows that this person didn't even take the time to try to make sure there's structure and that they actually cared. And I think presentation is everything, all the way from how you are in person, but even all the way down to your resume. And I know with people that I've worked with in the past, if I had handed this resume to them, they would immediately toss it and say, no, there's no way we would consider having this person even interviewing. So definitely something for. I think it is important that you want to like let people know everything you've done, but there's different ways that you can do that without it being so stuffed in a page.
Yep, absolutely. Okay, well, let's then go over resume building step by step. And the order in which all of this is, it's just up to your preference, and we'll give you some examples of what we mean by that. Okay, so right at the top, you want to get your contact information, and you want that to be the first thing that people see, because obviously that's the important piece of being able to reach out to you. Keeping that information up to date, a working phone number. You have no idea how many times I've called a phone number on someone's resume and it discontinues, or their voicemail isn't set up, or their voicemail box is full and I can't even leave a voicemail for them. And then they're missing out on opportunities just for silly mistakes like that. I prefer for the name to be in a larger font than everything else, but that's the only thing that I like to see as a larger font is just the name. Everything else should be the same size font. For me, my resume I think is like size 10 font because I have a lot of words on there too, but I think my name is maybe size 14. LinkedIn, you can add your LinkedIn in here, but I would only do it if you are able to embed the actual link so that the person can click on the link and it takes them directly to your LinkedIn page. The way that it's listed here for Amy Smith, it's just, I mean, it's her LinkedIn page, but I can't click it. I have to highlight it and put it into my web browser, which is an extra step for me. So definitely hyperlink that so that's an easier transition. You can have the way that your contact information looks in many different formats, but you really don't want to utilize more than 1.5 inches of space, ideally. Whether that be off to the side, like you could put it on the left column and have all your contact information listed that direction, or it can be along the top, but trying not to use more than 1.5 inches of that page. All right, education. Now, I get the question a lot of, do I have to put my high school experience on there? You know, how much education experience do you need to know? I've had people list elementary schools that they were at when they went to, you know, primary school and all that, so it's not necessary. You can list your high school. It's not a bad thing. It's a way for you to relate with the person that you're interviewing with too. If they see, oh, I'm from Crystal Lake too, so now we both know like how we grew up. It was in the same environment. So you could help yourself in creating those types of connections. Definitely listing college experience if you have that, even if you didn't graduate. You can still list that you attended college, but only identifying if you graduated, if you actually did receive a diploma and you graduated. There's been situations as well where people lie on their resumes and they, you know, say that they graduated college, but in fact they hadn't. And you know, employers can look into that if they really want to. Depending on the field that you work in, some people do actually look into that kind of stuff. Personally, for me in hospitality, I don't, but some types of fields do look into it. You want to list this in reverse chronological order. So the most relevant and recent information at the top. So I'm going to list my college experience first, and then I'll put my high school experience after that. And more importantly, don't list the year that you graduated from college or from high school. It's recommended not to. It's for a couple of different reasons. Can anyone guess what one of the bigger reasons is? it's because if you list your year that you graduated, then people will be able to guess your age. And there are discrimination cases of employers discriminating against certain age groups. So you don't want to give them any indicator of that. So that's why we wouldn't list the years that you attended. And then as well, if you transferred from another college, or if you did a study abroad program or something like that, definitely list it. Or if you do like a single class certification course, listing that type of experience is great because it helps show that you are continuing your education and it didn't just stop when you graduated college or graduated high school. I prefer for the education to be at the bottom of a resume, towards the bottom, not necessarily right at the top after your contact information. And there's a couple of reasons for that. For me, it's because I've been out of school since 2015. So I have 5 years of work experience without going through school. So I want to list my work experience at the top because that's relevant, most relevant right now in my life. But if I were to go back to school and get my master's, and then that becomes relevant in my life right now, then I'll bring my education back up to the top of my resumes because it is something that I'm currently working towards. But that's totally up to your preference. If you've graduated really recently, I would say within the last 3 years, you can keep it at the top. And you could put the year that you graduated as well. It just will reach a point in your life where you're like, I don't want to put the year that I graduated on this resume because it was a long time ago.
Hey,
All right. Yeah.
So can you just touch on being able to like add in any type of portfolio or your LinkedIn links within your resume and why you think that might be a great idea?
Yeah, of course. So providing that contact information or any resources to help showcase what you've accomplished, like your LinkedIn's, or if you do have a portfolio, embedding that link into the Word document is ideal. Which you can do that by just like highlighting the word and then click right on it and you can add in a link that way. Another thing too is to save your resume as a PDF document once you're done formatting it. I really don't like when I get Word documents attached because depending on the computer, everything is formatted a little bit differently. It may not look the same on my computer versus your computer. So you can guarantee with the PDF document that you always will have the same format and it'll look the same no matter who's looking at it. So I think having both of those are important. I personally do not have like a portfolio or anything like that that I've linked for myself, but there are some people that I've seen that maybe have writing samples, or if you're a journalist and you have your own your website for yourself, you can read excerpts of different projects you've done that way. All right. And then we have work experience. So this, of course, is like the most important part of your resume because you want to be able to showcase your experience in a very strategic way that stands out to the employer. So you want to talk about your work experience, you want to talk about your job titles as well, but you want to, excuse me, you want to remember that this is not to overcompensate for yourself and provide too much information. When you're listing your experience, I prefer that it has 4 bullet points or less. If you have more than that, it's just too much information for the employer to be reading at one time. They want to be able to grasp what you do in your job right away, very quickly. So no more than 4 bullet points per work experience is ideal, and not many sentences either. I usually keep 1 bullet point as 1 sentence, and that's it for me. Let's see here. Providing the company or organization name, your job title, and dates of employment. If I was working at one property for multiple years, but I had a few positions within that, I only need to list the organization's name 1 time. So I'll show you guys an example of what that looks like in a little bit. But job titles is actually something that I wanted Brittany to talk on a little bit more because I find it is very important to think about the way that you're coming across, because not everybody knows what one job title means in this field versus the same exact type of job in another field. So can you touch on that, Brittany?
Yeah, so when I first started out, I wanted to get into product management, but I was working in more project management roles. And even though this particular job kind of had the same duties that I was doing now, the recruiter told me, why aren't you listing product manager as your title on your resume? And the funny thing is that hiring manager actually looked at my LinkedIn profile, and they kind of weren't interested for a moment because they said, well, I don't see any product management listed anywhere. So the recruiter ended up telling me, hey, you need to update your resume and just change it to show product management. So the point is that if you're looking to get into a certain job, I think it's very advantageous of you to have your resume reflect the job that you want, and not so much focused on what you're doing right now. So anytime I look for a job, I always make sure that I update my resume to utilize certain keywords that are similar to what's in that job posting.
Mm-hmm.
That they know, like, oh, okay, she's capable of doing this particular job because hence she's already done it before. And it just helps be a better sell for you when you have your resume reflect that. So
yeah, you're going to create different versions of your resume for different positions that you're applying for. And I think that's something that people forget about pretty easily because it takes time and it takes effort, but we do want to try and customize your resume to the position that you're submitting that for, because that'll help make you stand out, because if it's just generalized, then it kind of gets lost in the mix of everybody else.
And Olivia, I think this is a great almost segue into, I think, something that Allison was asking about, right? She said that she wanted to figure out how can she kind of jump from one position to another in order to kind of So any advice you can give, especially like maybe if you have been working as an intern, should you still be listing intern? Can you give any advice to talk about that?
Oh yeah, I still list my internship experience because that's what started me in HR. And even though that was 6 years ago, it's something that contributed towards my success today. So I think that what you said about reading the job description of the job that you're applying for and utilizing some of those buzzwords in your resume is a great way to be relatable. When an employer or a recruiter is looking at your resume, they want to be able to see you doing that job. So if you're able to highlight that by putting buzzwords in that mean a lot to that company, depending on the field that you work in, that's usually what I would recommend. And that's why you're going to be revising your resume pretty frequently if you're actively looking for a job, because you don't want to just be very general. Let's see here. These are a couple of examples so you can see what employment experience looks like, or work experience. I have opinions on both of these dependent on how many years of experience you have. So I think with the top left one, the one that's talking about the Hilton San Juan Resort, so this person, I would imagine, does not have as much work experience as the person that is below, that worked at the Beverly Hilton, because of the way that their bullet points are listed and how long the sentences are for each bullet point. It's okay to have short bullet points as long as you're getting to the point of what you did in that job. You don't have to be as extensive as the bottom resume is showing here. My preference is, I guess, on the bottom resume with that one, I do prefer to be able to read that much if I really want to know what you did in that job as a manager. So this person has more work experience. They've climbed the ladder a little bit more in their roles. So I'm able to see that they had a lot of job duties in those certain positions. Okay, and then after that, you can talk about any awards or volunteer work that you have. It's not necessarily required for you to do this, but it's just nice to be able to showcase, different things that you've done outside of work, because nowadays I know for sure in interviews people ask about what you do outside of work because it matters. It's not just you come in to do the job and that's all we talk about. No, we talk about, we get to know each other as coworkers. So we want to make sure that we would like to work together. So any award section can be used that you have an outstanding achievement in. Volunteer section, if it's relevant. So, you know, for me, I worked with Make-A-Wish Foundation over the course of a couple of years. I don't have that listed on my resume, but I always make sure to talk about it in the interview if I see that the person I'm talking with has a strong interest in community service. So it's kind of like a little trick you keep in your back pocket. So it just depends on your preference, but you can list it here. And if you don't have a lot of work experience and it's been just many internships and many groups and activities that you've been involved in, this is where you can start to list that information. So maybe your work experience is not that long on the resume, but the volunteer experience is pretty significant. And I always find that to be impressive, because if you don't have a lot of work experience, maybe because, you know, you're new into the field, you were working, or you were going to school full time, you had multiple other activities you were involved in, that still shows me that you were an achiever, an overachiever, because you went and you were involved in multiple things and you weren't just doing your schoolwork. So I find that to be important to list as well. And then you want to make it look like the work experience section. So you can have bullet point lists of exactly how you have in the work experience if you had you know, a pretty significant role in whatever that volunteer work may be.
Hey, Olivia, this would be a great time to kind of open it up for additional questions. I know we have in the chat. One of the first questions that we had was, how many previous jobs should I list on my resume?
I think it depends. It depends how much time you've spent in each of those roles. I know some internships are only 3 months or 6 months, but the most ideal circumstance is that you've been with an employer for 1 whole year. If you are, what do we call it, like a job jumper, and you're only, you know, 1 job for 6 months, 1 job for 8 months, and I'm seeing a trend here, there's a lot of short periods of time that you've been at an employer, I find that to be a problem. I will move on. I won't even read your resume. But if I see that you've consistently been loyal to a company, or you've been there for more than a year, then I will actually take the time to look at your resume. So with internships, you can indicate that it was a 3-month internship, and that doesn't make you look like you're jumping around with jobs. It's allowing you to be able to showcase that you're learning and developing as you're growing your career.
Yeah, so, I've been working like every year since I was 15 years old. So I have a lot of like summer jobs and stuff like that aren't necessarily relevant to the media industry. So how should I go about including those? Because like I have a ton of jobs.
Yeah.
So, you know, but there's like 3 or 4 jobs that are like very relevant, but the rest are like Target, you know, a water park and whatnot. So
just list anything that's relevant to the position that you're applying for, I think.
Okay.
So if I'm applying for a restaurant manager, and I have experience working in restaurants, but I also have experience working in retail. Retail experience shows that I have quality customer service experience. So that is applicable in that circumstance. But, you know, if you had those many summer jobs and just things that, you know, just help pay for some of the bills or vacations that you've had, it's not completely necessary. Cool. Only do it for your career development if it's applicable.
Right.
And also to go back to what you said earlier, Olivia, so from my perspective, I actually did jump around quite a bit because I worked as like a consultant. So it also depends on the industry. In the tech, a lot of people do that. So I wouldn't shy away from it. I think the main thing is you have to really make sure you have a strong argument as for why you jumped around, but then also making sure you look up the employees at that company, because if you see that a lot of people have been there for a long time, then yeah, they might raise some red flags, because that is the core to their team, with people building out longevity, whereas in other companies it may not make that much of a difference because they're looking for people who have a vast array of experiences that they can So I would definitely just kind of keep an eye out on that.
Yeah, that's a good point. Thank you.
And then another question was from Andrew. How long should a resume be? How long is too long?
Well, it goes back to the years of experience that you have. If you are new to the workforce and you have less than 10 years of experience, I think your resume should never be longer than a page. And I've seen so many resumes that it's someone who's only been out of school for a year, but somehow their resume ended up being 5 pages. And it's like, you know, what are you doing so descriptively that makes it 5 pages? So you really want to try and make it 1 page as best as you possibly can. As you grow and get more work experience, then that's when you're able to start expanding the length. But then that's also when you can start removing older experiences that may not be applicable anymore. So you kind of just rotate through the positions that you're listing on your resume.
And did you guys have any other questions? Because I think, you know, your resume is crucial. So, you know, any questions you guys have, let us know. Anything else that's on the top of your mind?
I have a question. A few slides back, you had a resume that you utilized to kind of show what not to do, but at the very top, there was a paragraph kind of like introducing that person. Do you recommend putting that on your resume, or is that something that you would kind of shy away from?
My personal preference is to not have an objective listed at the top of a resume. And the reason for that is because in my industry in hospitality, what you're applying for is pretty straightforward, and what that job expectations are pretty straightforward. So there are some industries that probably would utilize this better, but I wouldn't have it more than 3 sentences. Like the way that this is listed here is way, way, way too long. I would have only used maybe 2 or 3 lines here rather than using, what is that, like 6 or 7 lines.
I have a question.
Sure.
About just like placement. A couple slides back, you also had this one, you had the LinkedIn profile. So if we were to add like stuff like portfolios or like websites or like YouTube channels or stuff like that, would you put all the links near the top, or would you like make a separate section somewhere else in the resume?
Good question. I would limit how many links are in your resume as much as you can. Like I wouldn't have more than 2, because as an employer, I'm not going to be spending a lot of time clicking around on your resume. I'm just going to keep moving forward. So if you are being conservative and you have only 1 or 2 links, you can keep it at the top. But in your industry, if you need to have multiple links, then I would create a whole nother section for it.
And I just want to touch on one point before I open it up for another question. So when it comes to your resume, I feel like, you know, things have really progressed and changed exponentially. And like when I graduated, yeah, maybe the objective at the beginning of your resume was like the end thing to do. But and I think you guys have to think about it from an employer's perspective. They don't have a lot of time. They want to be able to know that I can pick up a resume, quickly see those bullet points or keywords that was referenced in the job description, and then determine whether or not I want to consider this person for an interview. So you have to think about it from that aspect. So spend more time on those areas that's really going to grab their attention. Not so much a section where it'll be too lengthy. To bring that point up. But Armin Anderson, he had a question. Do you want to go ahead and ask your question?
Yeah, so I was wondering, like, if you didn't graduate college, how do you make your resume like appealing in general? Like would you still add the high school part to the education section, or would you just like take away the education section completely?
No, you definitely want to have an education section. Don't eliminate it completely. So if you didn't go to college, list your high school experience. If you didn't graduate high school, you know, listing, you know, maybe if you got your GED or something like that. So if you didn't graduate college, I would still put the college experience that you have on there, because even though you didn't graduate, you still took, you know, you got something out of it. You got a college education in some way. So I would still list it, but instead of putting graduation date, you know, 2020, I just wouldn't put a graduation date, because then that would indicate to me as an employer, this person went to college, but they don't have their degree. but it's still good to have. Okay. Okay, let's see here. And then the last thing is going to be about special projects and skills. Listing this is usually going to be at the bottom, like listing that you're proficient in Microsoft Office or you have all these, experience in various programs and systems. I would list that at the bottom because that's where, it's not as important compared to the current job that you're working at right now. And I do want to give you guys a little snapshot of my resume, I guess. So here's my resume if you can read it. So there's a lot going on here, and you can see that I have 6 jobs listed here, but 3 of them have been with one company. So I'm trying to show that I'm versatile in the way that I have experience working for various companies, but I'm also showing that I have been able to grow within the company that I worked with the longest. I don't have an objective. I don't have a summary at the top because for me, that's like your elevator pitch. And that's something that you can do in person when you're actually meeting with them or having a phone interview. So that's why I don't list it there. And I only have, a couple bullet points per position, and I try to keep it as 1 line, not make it 2 lines, but with some of the experience that I had, I found it was important to add a couple extra words in there to make it 2 lines. Education I do have listed towards the bottom. I do have my graduation years because I feel it's still pretty relevant, even though I graduated 5 years ago. It's, it's still something that I'm very proud of, and I want to showcase that still. But once I have more work experience, there will be a point that I'll take off the year. And then you can see my skills that are listed there at the bottom. Okay, so I wanted to just talk about some other tips and tricks before we open it up for the rest of our Q&A. Brittany and I wanted to kind of talk about what happens after you submit your resume. So you've uploaded and submitted your resume to multiple different job boards, Glassdoor, Indeed, things like that, and applying for multiple jobs, but what happens next? And from my experience as a recruiter, you may have a lot of applicants and you may not. So if you have a lot of applicants, and I'm thinking like 75 applicants or more for a position is considered a lot to me, I'm likely not going to be opening up every single resume. If I don't have a lot of applications, less than 75, or or if I'm good and I'm keeping up with it on a daily basis, I will try and open up every resume, to be fair. That's the best that I can do, because sometimes there's such a high demand of people that are applying for a certain role that recruiters just they're not able to keep up with opening every single resume. So the chances of your resume being looked at, the best is going to be applying for a job when it first opens. It's either when it's first opened or when it's on the tail end of closing, but of course you never know when the position is going to be closed and taken down offline. So knowing how long a position has been posted online is helpful. A lot of websites do show, like, posted for 15 days, and then in that case, I still think that's relatively new, but if it's been posted for 35 days, then I don't think that my resume will likely be noticed right away, at least. So once it's in the lap of a recruiter, they hopefully will look at it. If your resume is simple and to the point and clear, you're more likely to get your resume looked at. If it's messy and there's too many things going on with it, it's just too much time, I'm gonna move on to the next thing. So that's why you wanna be clear and concise in your resume. Cover letters, with using them or not, I don't think they're really that useful, but it depends on your industry. I only will read a cover letter if I'm impressed by the resume. I'll always open the resume first, and then if I'm like, okay, I want to pass this person on, then I'll quickly read a little bit of their cover letter, and if I find that to be intriguing, I'll send both of those documents to the hiring manager. So I don't find it to be completely necessary, but again, it depends on your field. Length of the resume, we talked about keeping it to 1 page and keeping the spacing and the fonts and everything pretty consistent and clear and easy to read. There's a couple things that we wanted to talk about here too, which is continuing education. So something that I've been doing during this interesting period in our lives is taking courses through Coursera.com. There's multiple different websites that you can do this sort of thing, but this one I like a lot. It's many different universities and doing online courses, and there's like a free 7 days for a class, and you can get a certificate at the end, and they're usually $20 or $30 a class, depending. So that one's really cool just to check out, and you can do this in your spare time. I was able to do like an emotional intelligence class in a matter of a week, and I didn't have to pay for it. So, you know, it worked out well, and I got a certification for that. So I definitely recommend always continuing to learn. It's going to show the employer that you care about your health, your mental health, and your stability. LinkedIn Premium. I personally have not used this until like 2 days ago, so that's why I added it on here. People have used this for the recruiting purposes as a recruiter, but for me as an applicant, I am only activating my premium account when I'm really actively looking for a job. So that helps you see the recruiter that posted the job themselves, so you can actually send them a message and say, hey, by the way, I applied for this position. Hopefully you can check it out. Or you can see how many people have applied for the job and where your skill sets align with some of the other people. So you can kind of get a nice glimpse of how like competitive or how much your application is going to stand out compared to others, depending on your experience. But the premium is only free for 30 days. So I mean, it's up to you. You can cancel it or you can go premium, whatever. But I'm going to try it out for a couple of weeks and probably just shut it off and once it's done with my free subscription. So I like that aspect of it too. And then attending networking events and job fairs, huge, huge, huge. You really want to make sure that you're trying to reach out to people, create those connections. You know, a lot of it, unfortunately, of getting a job has to do with the connections that you've made in both a positive way and it could be a negative way, depending on how you look at it. So going to these networking events and being vulnerable, but also having the confidence to show that you are capable of doing XYZ job, that's going to showcase your personality a lot better than it is going to be through submitted online. All right, what questions do you guys have? We have just a couple minutes left.
In terms of cover letters, they are the death of me. I always have trouble writing them. You said that they weren't on the top of your list of priorities, but what's something that you find in cover letters that's like, okay, I'm gonna like push this forward. We're gonna go with them. Something that you find.
Yeah, I think it has to do with really special projects that the person has been able to accomplish. I want to see how successful and accomplished you are. So doing the job duties, that's one thing that's expected of you, but the cover letter is showing how you go above and beyond and you've exceeded expectations of that job. What else?
For Coursera classes, I've taken 2 of those. Would you add them in the education section or the accomplishment section?
I would do it in the education. I just did this course like a couple days ago, so I haven't modified my resume yet, but I'm going to be listing it. I already listed it on my LinkedIn as a certification, so I would list it under the education. Thankfully, what you can do too is embed a link in there and it'll take that person looking at the resume directly to your certification to prove that it was completed as well. So you can embed that link into your LinkedIn or you can embed it into the resume itself.
What kind of courses do you recommend that like you have found on Coursera?
There's so many, it's so cool. Business courses, finance courses, emotional intelligence. Yale has this one course that I'm going to try. I think it's this art of well-being. So it's like about happiness. And I'm finding that we need to always be learning more about ourselves in order to be successful in our careers and not just focus on my expertise of human resources. I want to expand my knowledge, so I want to further develop myself personally with emotional intelligence or well-being. But then at the same time, I want to be able to understand the business better. So I'll take a couple business courses so that I can understand that. All right. I'm not trying to like advertise Coursera. I'm just very excited about it because it's been successful for me. But a couple other things we have for you guys. Brittany is actually offering a free resume review. So if you guys wanted to send your resume over to her, her info is right here. And then I put my email here too if you guys have questions or if you want to talk offline about stuff a little bit further. All right. Well, I think with that, I think we'll close everything up. I appreciate you guys joining us today. It was really fun. And we're here for you guys if you have questions. You know, this is an opportunity for you to connect with us because you typically won't have this type of opportunity. So definitely reach out to us with any questions that you have. And thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Of course. All right, guys. Have a good one.
Thanks, you too.
Bye. Have a good day.
Thanks so much.
Bye. Oh.
Hey, how are you? Well, let me stop recording this. We don't have to.